Today I'd like to start talking to you about a tipping point that heralds what I believe is the most exciting era of journalism. And I believe it's the most exciting era ever. And the tipping point is already upon us. It has arrived at lightning speed with the explosion in demand for mobile devices. I'm certainly not consigning newspapers to the scrap heap, not by a long shot. But this tipping point is going to change journalism forever. In my opinion, very much for the better. My contention is a bold one. If I'm correct, I will make newspaper publishers much more successful than they have been at any point in the past. My contention is this. We have the opportunity of moving from setting the agenda each morning to actually owning the agenda, all day, every day.
Publishing platforms cannot be endlessly added to a newsroom without changing its structure. It's like sticking wings on a car and expecting it to fly. The Adelaide Advertiser now publishes a newspaper, an iPad app, a website, an email newsletter, and will soon add a fifth platform, premium content. Mel Mansell, editor of the Advertiser, has created a unique approach to newsroom management.
The old newsroom, and it wasn't very long ago that it was operating, was a typical newspaper newsroom. It was efficient. It had been working the same way largely, really, for 150 years. Which might work well for a newspaper, but when you start publishing online to the extent that ours and other newspapers are, it's not going to work quite so well. And clearly, with the new technology coming, such as tablets and smartphones, then you've really got problems. So I knew that something had to change. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but we had a long, hard look at the newsroom, and we realised that this old structure, which was pyramid-based and flowed from the top to the bottom, may have been fine a century ago, but it just wasn't working. No, it was inhibiting communication. The amount of information flowing onto the floor was doubling every year, and it was inhibiting our capacity or our ability to do the job properly, and then it was really affecting communication.
Mr. Mansell said the new model was partly inspired by 24-hour broadcast newsrooms.
We're talking about places like Fox Sports, Fox News, Sky News in the UK, and ESPN. Tremendously flat management structure. There was a great deal of responsibility given to all individual people across the floor. And with that responsibility, the added responsibility of these people, I think there was a lot of opportunity, and they had a lot of control over their content.
Along with network managing editor Rod Savage, Mr. Mansell changed job roles, overhauled the decision-making process, and increased collaboration and responsibilities for staff.
We got rid of the chief of staff role completely; it's gone, and we replaced that single role, and there are other roles related to it, like deputy chief of staff and the like. Replaced it with 3 senior producers. We tried to get titles that were sort of platform agnostic, so they weren't kind of directly related to the paper or to online or whatever. They are producing content for all platforms, so there is a responsibility for all platforms within the titles. So the 3 senior producers who work across different shifts of the day. Beneath them is a series of desk producers. The desk producers are, I guess, what you might class as rounds, I suppose. But there's teams of people, and the desks that we have on the Tiser News floor is Cops and Courts, General News, Health and Education, which we kind of just pull under the title of policy, politics, business, entertainment, and sport. And so these teams all have a desk producer. The desk producer is responsible for the forward planning of those teams, the rostering of those teams, the daily ideas coming out of those teams. The desk producers are also still journalists. They're expected to write and to produce content as well. But it's also about how they take an idea and see how it goes across all platforms, or also take an idea and see how it works through a 24/7 news cycle.
In contrast to the hub-and-spoke newsrooms of the future championed some years ago, this revamp did not involve moving furniture, with the exception of moving the conference desk and buying a whiteboard. And it's not just any whiteboard.
Basically, anything you can do on a computer, you can do on this whiteboard. It's terrific for visuals, so particularly photographs. But you can blow photographs, we can crop photographs, we can draw pages on the whiteboard, just like a rough to show people how we want to use things. We use the whiteboard to show people some of the great work that we're doing or we've got coming up. We show them pages of sections that have been completed in the paper. If we've got very good interactive graphics online that we need to be promoting, we can show people on the whiteboard as a group and they get a better understanding of what's happening.
They also moved the conference desk into the centre of the newsroom.
And the idea behind that, and it wasn't my idea, it was actually used quite extensively in Scandinavian countries, was that in newsrooms, when senior staff go behind the glass wall to talk about things, everybody thinks the conference is secret, and a lot of reporters think that editors are saying nasty things about it. But certainly this newspaper was not true. By having a conference on the floor, people can hear what's going on. Everybody is invited to attend. Often people are just walking past and they'll stop and listen to what's going on. If we're talking about a specific story, we're right in the middle of the floor, and often the reporter is very close, and we can just call them over and they can come over. They can come over and talk. But most importantly, people realise that this is part of the collaborative process. They can see, they can hear, and they can take part in what's going on.
At the beginning of each news conference, Paul Starrick, News Director Digital, presents traffic and social media metrics for online and mobile content.
What I'm trying to do is show people, the broader newsroom managers and leaders, how things are progressing, particularly online. That does take into account some iPad, and what I'm trying to do is show them what's driving traffic and explain why. And also explain some of the trends behind why traffic might be higher or otherwise on a particular day, because that helps us tailor our content to the reader. And I'm not saying that we drive our decisions, solely by that. I kept Egypt up at the top of the Egypt story at the top of the site for a long time this morning, even though it wasn't doing a lot of traffic, because I thought it was the most important news story. We then replaced it with the cyclone, which was doing lots of traffic. So it also helps to explain, and in the manner of a news list really, what add-ons we're doing, gets people thinking about, well, how do we help drive that traffic through a video or an interactive map, or something that, even just a gallery, fairly simply, of the worst cyclones Australia's ever had. It just does add to that thought and trigger debate amongst the newsroom. I guess the wider point is, we've inserted the digital decision making into the wider conference, rather than having an online section that's just bolted on to the newsroom, as many newsrooms do. The digital decision making process is just a part of the wider decision making process. So it's all, the decisions are made by the story, and how we're going to treat the story, and then by platform.
But for all these changes, is it any easier to cover the news? Mr. Starrick certainly thinks so.
The news cycle has changed so dramatically that unless you change your newsroom structure, you're starting from behind the eight ball. And so for me personally, being part of that change is quite exciting, because the fact that, for example, you're here to chart that is interesting and a compliment to those involved. It's good to, on one level, to feel like that you're pioneering something that's working. Then on the other level, it's good to be able to, and probably more importantly, or certainly more importantly, it's good to be able to cover the news more effectively. That's why we're journalists. At the end of the day, we want to be able to cover the news effectively to our audience, be they in paper, online, or on the iPad. And the more ways we can tell a story to them in a fair, accurate and balanced fashion, the better.